Uli Hanisch is the production designer for the Netflix series Queens Gambit. I'm Matt Noble of Gold Derby, and I wanted to ask you, Uli, what was your favorite place to design in the Queen's Gambit?
You mean which set?
Yeah, which set?
Well, that's you know what? It's always a bit hard to say. Uh, uh, Sometimes I would almost say it's like asking what is your favorite child if you have more than one, because you kind of love them all. I think the heart and soul of Queen's Gambit was the Wheatley house, the house of Mr. and Mrs. Wheatley. That was the first bigger thing we started in our design process because we obviously was or it is the heart and soul of the show, and the most complex one anyway. And I thought, okay, if I get a grip on that, I know how the rest of the show will look like. And then, of course, the whole idea of the process for Beth coming from these really poor roots, from this trailer, and then being in that orphanage, and suddenly coming to a private home in a way she's never seen or never been, and getting her own place and all that. I think it's a very emotional place, and that's why we designed that first and went pretty wild with that.
Yeah. What was the most sort of challenging place to have to design or set to have to design for the show?
Well, I think when we started to look at all the tournaments, we kind of recognized, or it was clear that we have to design them all in a very different way, in a very significant way, and always a bit over the top, also representing not only the tournament but also the city where it takes place, and also in terms of what those tournaments would mean for the character Beth in her kind of development on her way. So they were all kind of challenging. Well, maybe technically, remember the tournament in Mexico City in that kind of Aztec palace. I think it was called the hotel. We found this beautiful location, which is actually the lobby of a something you would probably call something like a Broadway of kind of theater.
Mhm.
So it's an extremely busy place at that time. It was still running, obviously, and so they usually have, I think, 6 days a week, two shows a day, like 4,000 people running in and out. So it's a great place, but it's almost impossible to get in. So when we proposed it, it was also unclear if we really can make it. And then the people of the theater were friendly enough and saying, you know what, we like the idea, let's make that somehow possible, but with very, very strong time restrictions. So we were shooting over a weekend. And I remember, I think either the Saturday or the Sunday was the first shooting day. Regardless, we could only enter there the night before, and we had to dress the entire place on, I think, 3 floors, with all the whatever, the whole tournament, the lobby, whatever, all the bars in just 12 hours. So we went in there with, I think, something like 80 people or so, and it was mayhem. It was just crazy. The pure logistics. We were figuring out how many doors and back entrances and where we could enter. We had to bring in carpets and whatever. And it was a very, very busy night, and we were almost a bit scared if we can really make it until the morning. And it turned out really well. And it's a very strange and kind of extraordinary place. And once we did that, we figured that if we can make that, we can make everything.
Ah, like it's interesting how you say that like it was a sort of strange and extraordinary place because in some ways like the Queen's Gambit is a strange but extraordinary series. And what
That's
was like yeah, and what was sort of extraordinary for you about making this show?
well. First, and of course, the pure idea when Bill Horvath called me. He's the creative producer behind the whole show, and I know him for something like 20 years. And he called me and said, listen, can you read this novel? And we thinking about coming abroad to Europe and shooting maybe in Berlin, maybe somewhere else, and figure out what you think about it, what do you think about shooting it in Berlin? And then I read the novel, and I was wondering because I think 80 or 90% takes place in the US, like including Mexico City, however, but it's only a bit of Paris and a bit of Moscow, right? And I thought, why the hell would they come to Europe? You know, why not shooting it in the US? And understanding the story better, realizing that how interior her world is, I understood the idea better, and then we started to research, finding out how many, because we thought, okay, the main thing is or are all those ballrooms, conference, whatever centers, wherever those tournaments would take place. And I realized that we have plenty of those because of the history of Berlin, really, and because we have so many town halls, we have so many different places. We have, of course, the eastern and the western part, so we could kind of offer a lot of strange and very, very different places. And okay, I thought that makes sense, and let's propose to shoot almost everything here. And that's what we did. We actually ended up shooting only 5 days in Toronto, and the rest was, shot in Berlin. And that was, of course, a very kind of funny challenge. And but beside this, I kind of fell in love with the character and thought it's 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 a very big challenge to get all those places done in the wrong city in Berlin, representing all those other cities, firsthand, but then also saying, okay, it's the 60s, which is a very nice period. It is the 60s in the US. So we are wrong here in Europe, in Germany. But then also finding out that it's not a pure period film or show. It's above that, it's a magical city, a magical story, and we could go over the top pretty strongly. Also, after talking to Scott Frank, saying we are not really bound to whatever kind of realities. We create our own world, and that I liked very much, to overstep, the pure realism and really creating this kind of strange, awkward world of Beth, really.
Yeah. You said you sort of fell in love with the character. What did you love about Beth Harmon?
I think she's this awkward kind of superhero. I figured that in a way we are doing a superhero movie here, or a series, because she is this kind of outsider, kid who's really a lost soul, and she has, in a way, by her by her start, she would have no chance to get anything done in this world. And then she all of a sudden has this almost supernatural ability, and that gets her, to open the door into the world. And I think that's a very emotional thing, and that's something which we all of us have to figure this kind of problem, and deal with that. And if you have somebody who is so lost, and so poor in a way, you, of course, it's fantastically amazing and emotional to follow her and to see how she can succeed, even though, or maybe even just because she is so special, because she has this ability, and she's a very strong fighter for, while doing that, also being a girl or a young lady at that period of time. um, I think that is something which I could connect very easily to.
Mm. Like, yeah, it's interesting. Like what you're talking about, and how she's like it's sort of a very dark story in a lot of ways, but there's optimism, hope that runs through her journey and her story because of her like ability, and because of maybe some of the people in her life as well. What kept you sort of hopeful or optimistic as you were making the sets for this show?
Well, the thing is that everything, because she's such a strange interior character, you don't really know. We were never really sure how much she's even reflecting or knowing about the world outside. That makes the whole thing very, very interior. Um, and so every place is kind of overwhelming for her. And we were always trying to get a balance of something which is intimidating, and overwhelming and also fascinating. And it's always over the top. And for example, I mean, of course, there's a journey, and the tournaments are so different. But for example, the last tournament in Moscow, the pure idea was to create something which is pure hell. It's like the most intimidating, gloomy, temple of doom, for her to be challenged with, and I think that is, to have this strange balance of everything, of somebody who can't really cope, but it's also her horizon is getting wider and her perspective is getting bigger. Is that it's that you have, that the world is always too much, and I think that's what we were trying to achieve. Is that everything is kind of too big, too grand, too spectacular, too heavy, too whatever. I like to do that.
Yeah, and there's like you say, like where she sort of ends in Moscow with the tournament's very gloomy and intimidating, and her sort of beginnings in the series is in the orphanage, which also has sort of a sense of like gloom about it, where she has to sort of find her own way. Like it's sort of, there's a bit of a nice bookend to the series there.
Yeah, yeah. I think the most horrible place to set up, I mean, for the story, is the basement where Mr. Scheibel is usually on his own. And I think the fun about this was to create something which is this kind of your classic Hannibal Lecter kind of setup, and her being a little girl going down there and then kind of meeting this strange man. You can't do anything else but expecting the worst, right? And so the idea was really to set up this kind of almost spooky horror film kind of place. And then like the rest of the story, or how the whole story goes, it's not happening. Something else is happening. And I think that was always kind of the strange, you know, outcome of this story, is that also, starting, like I said before, the whole start for her is so bad and so hopeless, and you always expect within the story that something terrible would happen to her and she would fail, but she doesn't. I mean, let's say beside the fact of the drug and alcohol, whatever problems she has, she kind of, you always fear and expect that she would lose it, or yeah, just simply fail, and she doesn't. And I think that's this strange nature of the story, which I like very much.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite scene or moment from the series?
There are pretty many, right?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, everybody's talking about the final moment after she succeeded in Moscow, and she's almost in a way on her way to the airport, and we don't really know, but that's how it seems. And she leaves the car and just walks through Moscow, and then gets into this puddle of this old man playing chess. And then they recognize her, and then you realize that she is kind of, how would you say that in English, like she's released, she's opening up, and you feel that she's ready to yeah, she's ready to enter the world. That's a very emotional moment.
Yeah. No,
um,
that's good.
but also I remember, the very first time when she's invited to do this simultaneous chess thing in this high school. And
Yeah.
again, it's a simple set. It's nothing but a bigger classroom or something. But we created this U-shaped table around her, which is like an arena, and all those boys would sit around, and she's in the middle, just on her own, and then she's killing all of them and really slaughtering them, and you have more and more people coming in, to create those very emotional moments for her and setups. That's something I loved, a lot.
Mm. Do you think, like, as the person designing the sets, as the production designer, what was the most important choice that you made throughout the series?
Just simply to go over the top. And of course, when we do something like this and going period, of course, everything in a way has to be right. Of course, you deal with the 60s and all that. But in a way, we were leaving that pretty much behind and saying we do whatever feels right for the character. And I think that is something which you can't do, on every show, obviously, but you could do it here. And of course, to have the chance to do all these kind of crazy design features, in all those hotel rooms and tournaments, everything was just really over the top. I mean, again, in the Wheatley House, I think we were using, I think, only just something like 7 different wallpapers on the, on the first floor alone, and everything was really kind of visual. It was never meant to be like super stylized or fancy. It was always, again, driven to what she's experiencing, and that's what I liked about so much. It's that you could have all these strange choices of being so design driven without being interested in the design.
That's interesting. Was there growing up? Was there a film or a TV show that you just love the sets in that made you want to get into production design?
Oh, okay, that's a very different question now.
Yeah, no, I've gone left field. I've gone left field on you, Uli.
Well, I was watching Brazil the other day, and I haven't seen it really for ages. And I remember, for my generation, I've seen it. I don't know. I mean, when was it released? Mid '80s or something? And maybe I haven't seen it ever since. I don't know exactly, but and I remember that when I saw it at that time, I was blown away. I mean, at that time I was like something like 18 or whatever, or maybe even younger. So I wasn't thinking about anything, specific or professional, of course. But when I saw it again, I could remember my sensation at that time, and when I saw it, I thought, wow, that's something kind of it's somehow influential, because again, I think I like the mixture of something which is really over the top. It's kind of self-made and invented, and you don't care about if that really could exist like this. Again, it's also very story-driven, everything, and I think that's maybe a good reference.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Uli, thank you so much for talking to us today about the Queen's Gambit. It was so great. All the best of luck with the upcoming Emmy Awards. And people watching this interview can go to goldderby.com to make your own awards predictions. Thanks, Uli.
Okay, thank you so much for your time and your interest. And have a nice day.